Trump just dropped a bombshell announcement on Russia, and Russians are freaking out. Everyone from Russian supporters to Russian officials are taking to Twitter and just pure panicking. So let's get into that, starting of course with what Trump said. This was his warning.
Cold War, and it should be stopped. And so if it's not done, if we don't have an agreement in 50 days, that's what we're doing, secondary tariffs, and they're biting. And I hope we don't get to the point where we do, but I've been hearing so much talk. It's all talk. It's all talk, and then missiles go into Kiev and kill 60 people. It's got to stop. It's got to stop. But the purpose of this is to say that this is a very big deal we've made. This is billions of dollars worth of military equipment is going to be purchased from the United States, going to NATO, etc. And that's going to be quickly.
So billions is correct. $10 billion of weapons are going to NATO, and then NATO is transferring those to Ukraine. So US is getting paid, Ukraine is getting the weapons it needs. On top of that, $10 billion is the biggest aid package we have so far since the war started. One before that was $6 billion under President Biden. $10 billion is almost double that. Almost. Not quite enough, but still a huge package. And that's exactly why Russians are freaking out. First of all, the weapons are going in right now. And secondly, in 50 days, Russia is going to get hit with sanctions. And these sanctions are going to hurt way more than the previous ones, because these sanctions are targeting allies, Russian allies who are funding this war, who are funding the Russian war chest. That includes China, India, Brazil, Turkey, Hungary. Whoever is buying Russian oil is going to get hit with sanctions. And a lot of these countries, especially China, India, even Turkey, they trade a lot with the United States, so they cannot afford to have 100% sanctions placed on them just for buying Russian oil, because they would lose out on the US market, which they cannot afford, especially considering their economy and how export dependent they are. So Russia knows this is a huge deal, and that's why all over the place, they don't know what's going on. This one Russian account is basically saying that the whole Trump assassination thing was fake, because that's how much they're melting down. But let's start from the big dogs. This is Kirill Dmitriev. Now, the way Russian system works, and this is not coming from me, this is coming from Jason J. Smart, a regular journalist who comes on Business Basics a lot, and he has been inside Russia for many years. He was actually personally banned by Putin, and he says this is how the Russian system works. Putin will never come out and bad talk anyone who's attacking Russia. He has dogs for that. He has puppets for that. Well, one of them is Kirill right here. Many have speculated that he's going to be next in line once Putin is gone. He's 72 or 73, so he's old. And Kirill right now is the head of the Russian Sovereign Wealth Fund. And on top of that, he was one of the chief negotiators at all the negotiation talks that just took place between Russia, Ukraine, and Russia and the United States. So clearly his neck is on the line, because whatever he was doing is not working, because Trump was pretty friendly with Russia when he took office, and now he's very against it. Maybe he's losing his future of ruling the Russian Empire, and that's why he's freaking out. And this is what he's saying. He knows he cannot just attack Trump, so he's trying to attack him indirectly. People who follow Biden's false narratives and approaches lead the world to winter. Now, he posted a Game of Thrones clips. I doubt I can play it, but basically it's a compilation of all the Game of Thrones people saying winter is coming. He's saying that Russia is going to go nuclear, basically, indirectly, because nuclear winter, a lot of people talk about, threatening the United States just because we are supplying Ukraine with weapons, which we are not directly, but anyways. What Russia is basically saying is, it's fine if Russia gets weapons from Iran. It's fine if Russia is getting drones from China. And it's fine if Russia is getting artillery shells and soldiers from North Korea. But when Ukrainian allies start supporting Ukraine, that's World War III. Not just World War III, that will be nuclear war. You can see who's the one who's freaking out here. But let's continue. But we already talked about this. He was the chief negotiator in all the negotiations. And I'm sure Putin's not going to be happy with him, with the way things are going. Moving up, we have next why he's doing this. He's actually a Stanford and Harvard graduated man. Russia, such a great country that the top people in Russia don't even study in Russia. They come to the United States. But I'm guessing he didn't pay much attention in these classes because he was not very good at negotiations. And if he had paid attention in his business classes and all that, maybe he would have learned a thing or two. Because here we have the NATO Secretary General, Mark Rutte, explaining how Russia was just not taking the negotiations seriously. And that's why Trump is doing what he's doing now. And he has a very funny comparison as to how the Russian negotiators were acting. So let's listen in.
I remember I was myself in Turkey for NATO business in May, and we really put pressure on the Ukrainians to send a senior team into Istanbul, and they did. But then the Russians came up with this historian explaining history of Russia since 1250.
Maybe that's also a shout out to the Tucker Carlson interview when he went to Russia and asked Putin why he attacked Ukraine, and Putin went on a 20-minute rant about how 800 years ago Ukraine was part of Russia and that's why he deserves it. And on top of that, by the way, Tucker was truly shocked at Russia having all these. But anyways, that's not a conversation for this video. Anyways, moving on, here we have another Russian account purely just melting down. And here I want to start pointing out the contractions, not contractions, but the contrasting points they're making. On one point, all the Russians are saying that Ukraine was invaded because Russia could not have NATO missiles in Ukraine right on Russian borders. And now this is what the same Russians are saying about NATO missiles. NATO is still drunk on its so-called technological supremacy, acting like their shiny toys would crush oil. But where's the proof? Javelins, IRIS-T, Patriots, Abrams, Leopards, Challengers, all that overblown scrap that had done jack to shift the battlefield. They can keep throwing it at Ukraine, trying to prop up a failing state into non-existent. It changes nothing. The strategic reality spits in their face. The West not chasing victory. It's burning cash on delusional pipe dream and blinded by its own smugness. That was a lot. They're not big on being consistent with their arguments because on one hand, as I said just a little bit ago, they're afraid of NATO missiles being on the Russian border. But on the other hand, they also say NATO weapons don't really change anything because Russia is just such a strong army, second strongest army in the world, that was supposed to take Kyiv in 3 days, but those days are still counting. Maybe you know how dog years are different than human years? Maybe the Russian days are different than like human days or something. I'm not sure, but let's talk about the same thing. All these weapons they're pointing out, Patriots, Abrams, and all these, they're not that good according to Russians. But at the same time, United States should not be giving these to Ukraine because why give it to Ukraine? They're not good, but don't give it to Ukraine anyway. This is like the same argument they make about sanctions, where they say sanctions are not really hurting Russians at all. But then when it comes to negotiation, first thing they ask for is, hey, can you lift off the sanctions? So what is it? Do you care about the sanctions or do you not care about them? Next up, we have none other than Russian propaganda state TV, the Kremlin TV Sputnik. And this is what they're talking about. This is what they're saying about the Patriot missiles. So Trump said in his statement he could be sending up to 17 Patriot missiles. Then again, he said probably not. So it's probably going to be less than 17. And he was very specific, saying that he's not going to disclose what we're giving to Ukraine because that's just an advantage to Russia. Why would we disclose that publicly? So the Russian accounts have really hang on. So the Russian accounts are really hanging on to that up to 17 Patriot missiles that Trump said he's sending, and they're trying to debunk it. Why the Patriots are not very good. And they have none other than Scott Ritter, the same guy who cannot get a job here in the United States, so he's working for a Russian state TV. That's the guy they have debunking President Trump. Let's listen in though, because it is good comedy.
I mean, in a perfect world, if you were able to bring up to 17 batteries in and get them all installed in the places you want them to be installed without any issue, you could complicate Russia's plans when it comes to, delivering weapons to targets inside Ukraine. But
see, I'm not an experienced military guy like Scott Ritter over here, but I would say Russia's plans are already complicated because they were trying to take over Ukraine in 3 days. And maybe the Russians just count the days differently.
But the fact of the matter is, these weapon systems, we don't even know if there's going to be 17. It's up to 17. We don't know what the delivery timetable is. Are these nations going to release them now? And does Ukraine have sufficient personnel trained to operate 17 batteries? Ukraine has, trained people to operate the
freedom of activity. Maybe I haven't heard that much, but they don't have air superiority still. The second largest military in the world cannot maintain air dominance over Ukraine. A country that didn't even have a navy destroyed the Russian Black Sea fleet. So I think Ukraine will be just fine. Since the start of January, 100,000 Russians have died. That means roughly 1,000 Russians every 2 days. Next up, we have Douglas McGregor, a retired US colonel. And let's see what he has to say about it. The weapons we are sending NATO, which are being sent to Ukraine, will not have much, if any, impact on Russia. I'm guessing everyone got their talking points as we got later in the day, because this statement was made 6 hours after Trump's statement, then going with the argument that these are not going to make any difference. But then again, these could lead to a nuclear war. So they're still not completely decided if these weapons are very dangerous, that it will lead to nuclear war, or if they are just nothing burger. And talking about nothing burger, actually, I have another account who cannot decide what this is going to happen, what's going to happen next. So same thing here. The Trump announcement is apparently a nothing burger, but the same announcement is going to start a war with Russia. It doesn't matter, but it's also a big deal to start a war. Still trying to get their talking points all together. Now, the last reaction I have is quite possibly the funniest one, because as you guys know, the First Lady is from Eastern Europe, and the Eastern Europeans are not very fond of Russia because of their history and all. Soviet Union invasions, all that kind of stuff. And apparently she played quite a big role in convincing Trump to support Ukraine so Ukraine can maintain their independence. They can fight against this senseless invasion that Putin started. And Russians are not very happy with the First Lady for doing so. This is what Trump said, and then we'll get into their reaction.
Numerous times I'd get home, I'd say, First Lady, I had the most wonderful talk with Vladimir. I think we're finished. And then I'll turn on the television, or she'll say to me one time, wow, that's strange because they just bombed a nursing home.
I don't know why they're laughing. I don't know. I laugh too, but I know I'm going to get comments about that, but it's just the way he says stuff. It's just funny. I know what he's talking about is truly sad.
They said, what?
That did convince him. Yeah. Now Trump, I think, realizes the impediment to peace is not Ukraine, it's Putin. Vladimir Putin, he wants to rebuild his legacy. He wants to rebuild the Soviet Union. And that's why we cannot have peace in Ukraine. But this is how Russians are reacting. If you think about it, US bombing an empty Fordo base is probably connected to Trump coming home to his Yugo wife. Russians are not very big on giving independence to the old Soviet state. There's a whole Azerbaijan-Russia war that might start soon because Russia cannot have Azerbaijan supporting Ukraine. Russia thinks a former Soviet state can only be independent if it stays under the Russian thumb. If it wants to defy Russian orders, then it's not an independent state. Which is very funny because that's the exact language they used with Ukraine. Let's see what happens with Azerbaijan. Anyway, let's continue with the statement. Trump coming home to his Yugo wife, who kept berating him that Putin bombs Ukraine daily. Trump whining that Russian drone strikes don't somehow stop while he's on phone with Putin is so bizarre. Genuinely personality disorder compliment. He attacked under the city while we were talking. This is crazy because some of these Russians, it's like they cannot understand that Trump wanting peace in Ukraine. Oh my God. So horrible thing that Trump wants. They see Ukrainian as like subhuman. They don't treat them equally. And then when Ukraine fight back, Ukraine attacks Russian bases inside Russia, somehow that's like a major escalation. It's like Russia is using those bases to attack Ukraine in any kind of war. That's like fair game. But for the Russian brain, it doesn't comprehend. It just doesn't compute. Maybe the universities are not very good. That's why all the Russians keep coming over to Stanford and Harvard. That's it for today. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe button. And if you enjoy it, we'll make more of these.